We titled this one, The Four Attributes of God, as symbolized by those four animals or images that we're going to be pulling from the book of Ezekiel. And these images are the ox, the eagle, a man, and a lion. Ox, eagle, man, and a lion. And we are going to create characteristics of these images, and we're going to have quadrants and put ideas and people and philosophies all around the spectrum, and even religions, the four religions as they fall. So let's start with where it shows up in the Bible. Give me the picture of the cross of the 12 tribes when they were parked around the tabernacle in the desert with Moses. This is how the 12 tribes of Israel were parked around the tabernacle where God's presence was. And notice the ones that were immediate. You have Ephraim, Dan, Judah, and Reuben. And those are like the standard bearers of the entire quadrant, shall we say. So it is their symbols that were parked here, 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 and here. And Reuben's symbol, if you look at any Jewish encyclopedia, Reuben was the man. Dan was the eagle up top. Judah was the lion out of the tribe of Judah we're familiar with. And Ephraim was the ox. So you're like, we got these four images. So what? What do they all mean? Pull up the Ezekiel. Okay, this is the Jewish encyclopedia that we're not making up the fact that Dan is the eagle, Ephraim is the ox, Reuben was a man, and Judah was the lion. Let's pull up the Bible verses in Ezekiel. That one. Okay, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel, and the hand of the Lord was upon him. And out of the midst thereof there came for likeness of four living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, but there's four faces. And the likeness of their faces, they had four, of a man, of a lion on the right side, and of a face of an ox and an eagle on the other side. Same thing in Revelation. This image comes back, and the first beast was like a lion, second beast was a calf, third was a face of a man, and the fourth was the flying eagle. So let's look at what's the big deal about these animals. Let's start with the eagle. What do we have about an eagle? An eagle is the apex predator. It flies the highest out of all animals. He flies alone. He flies in the highest realm. Nobody is above him. And so we have singularity, we have single, we have highest, I would say glory in. Nobody, he sees everything and nobody sees him. Okay? There's a sense of omniscience with the eagle. Omniscience and omnipresence. He sees the physical realm, but the physical realm doesn't see him. Eagle eyes. So there's a sense of he's a spirit. He's kind of like a spirit where you can feel it. He can see you, but you can't see it. And think divine. All the armies of the world, when they go into battle, they put the eagle in front of them. The Romans, the Greeks, even the Americans today. The idea is that God is with us in this battle, and therefore we're going to win because God's on our side. That's why we put the eagle. And it's an effort to create a divine link. That we have his blessings. What about a lion? Or let's look at the opposite of the eagle. For the opposite of the eagle right now is the man. So what we have, instead of divine, we have human. Okay? Instead of physical, instead of spiritual, we have physical. Flesh and blood type stuff. We have limited sight and limited presence. We cannot see everything. Limited sight, limited knowledge. Okay? So the contrast between God and man is positioned over here. Let's look at the contrast between ox and lion. Let's start with the ox. Look at the ox, beast of burden, carries weight, not its own. You put a big wooden stick on his back, right around here, and he carries this big hunk of wood. He plows the hard ground. He's got to pull that plow to break up hard ground. He gets whipped. Okay? Think about it. So he breaks hard ground. He gets whipped. He's a beast of burden. Beast of burden. He's let's say a suffering servant. That's the main attributes that we're going to be trying to communicate. A suffering servant. And then what thanks does he get at the end of doing all this for you? We kill him. His destiny is he gets slaughtered and he goes to the butcher. That's what happens to ox. So he gets whipped, carries a big hunking cross, carries your burdens, your sins, breaks up the fallow ground of hard hearts, and at the end he gets killed. The lion, he's very nice. He doesn't bite, he doesn't chew up, he just kind of takes it. The lion, on the other hand, does not share authority really well at all. This guy takes instructions from somebody. Notice everybody's telling him what to do. Lions don't take instructions very well. It's their way or the highway. You could go to Vegas and ask Siegfried and what's left of Roy. I don't know if anybody that shows up and wants to negotiate for authority gets immediately eviscerated. These guys do not share authority. They are conquering kings. The king of the jungle. Full one law, and that's his law, and they do not treat enemies with grace or with mercy. They chew up enemies. Enemies get treated violently. Enemies dealt violently. They just don't put up with it at all. In the Jewish realm, they break up their messiahs into two chunks, Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph. Everything in the scriptures points to these two messiahs that are so different. One is such a suffering guy. They literally had to come up with two different messiahs. We came up with the idea that we have one Messiah coming in two different times. They came up with the idea that it must be two different guys altogether because they're so opposites. They're so polar opposites. A guy who's like this can never be like that, and a guy who's like that can never be like this. Okay, so that's the attributes of a lion. Law, think authority, think violent elimination of enemies, establishes himself as the king of the pride land, and as long as nobody messes with him, he just sits there quietly. But as soon as somebody challenges his authority, he starts to roar. Okay, those are the four attributes, the physical attributes of these animals. Now, let's keep going in the Bible of like the branch. God describes himself as the branch. Now look at the 4 times that the word branch is used. Over here in Isaiah, he calls himself the branch of the Lord. And over here, the Lord is like Jehovah. It's the branch of God. The next time in Zechariah, behold, the name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place. What does it say, man? Behold the man whose name is the branch. So over here, the branch is Jehovah's branch. Over here, the branch is a man. Look over here. In Jeremiah, we're talking about a branch, capital B, and he's a king who's going to reign and prosper over the earth. He shall execute judgment and justice. Notice, the lion is over here. Over here, he's a humanity guy who's going to build a temple, and he's going to hang out with us humans. He's not in heaven, far and away. He's down on earth, mano a mano, face to face. And over here in Joshua, it actually says, my servant, the branch. So all 4 characteristics of God are linked to these four images. And let's see, where else do we see it? Look at the four Gospels. The Gospel of Matthew comes first. Why? Because it was written to the Jews, and the one thing that the Jews like is a conquering king. So Matthew talks about Jesus as being the conquering king of the Jews. Then what do you have? You have Mark. Well, Mark is over here. He is talking about a beast of burden. He's talking about a guy that gets whipped, whose beards get plucked, who washes people's feet, who forgives. He's very nice, he's very graceful, and he's focusing on the suffering servant aspect of the Messiah. Luke, the Gospel of Luke. What do we have here? We have his humanity. His DNA is traced all the way back to Adam. You want to show that somebody's a human being? You showed him that he's a son of Adam. Basically, he's the son of man. And over here, he's the son of God. Okay? So Gospel of Luke talks about his humanity, his physical nature, and of course the one that's missing is Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's literally telling you that this being is divinity incarnate. Now, there's a rabbi called Botiak. He wrote a book called Kosher Jesus. And what he said is he honestly admitted that Jesus has never violated any of the Old Testament laws. He was actually a kosher Jew. He goes, in the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, I could almost stomach as an Orthodox Jew. He goes, where you guys lost your mind, where you guys went off the deep end is whoever wrote the book of John. And he goes, and his claim to fame is this book was written after. And he goes, and that's when you guys forgot all about who Jesus really was. And you started giving him attributes and characteristics that did not belong to him, i.e. his divinity. That's something that you guys added. It didn't belong. And at that point, we have to leave you guys alone and walk away from your definition of Messiah. But my point is that he almost tolerated Jesus as a potential law-abiding Jew who was about to establish the kingdom. Unfortunately, he failed because we killed him, but he was well on his way to fulfilling Old Testament prophecy if he would have established the kingdom to Israel and established world peace. And goes, and unfortunately, he didn't do that, and that disqualifies him from being our Messiah. Let's look at the four apparitions of God. There's more than that, but these are four, and they point to a particular aspect. Remember when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the fiery furnace? Nebuchadnezzar looks inside the furnace and says, dude, I see four guys in there, and one of them looks like the Son of God. You got an eyewitness testimony of a king, Nebuchadnezzar, pagan king, looking in and seeing these beings that are in 1,000-degree heat. Soldiers got killed because of the heat just in throwing these guys in. And for some reason, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not burning up. And there's a fourth guy that shows up in their midst. And he says they have no hurt, and they form the fourth is like the Son of God. So this apparition, think about it. They're in 1,000-degree heat and they're not melting. They're metaphysical beings. It's not a physical body. A physical body would burn. This is God showing up in a divine order. Look at the next one we want to talk about is when he appears as a good old Joe, just an ordinary guy. When he appears to Abraham in the plain of Mamre, he sits down with Abraham. He gets a little bread. He sits under a tree like he's got temperature control issues. Abraham sits and they start having a meal. They're making cakes. They're eating a cheeseburger. I mean, this is like a human-to-human, a man-to-man encounter. And then God gets up and says, hey, where you going? And he tells Abraham, I'm thinking about going to Sodom and Gomorrah. I got to do some checking out here with my peeps. I got Gabriel and Michael here ready to throw some fire and brimstone. And Abraham actually gets in his face and says, wait, hang on a sec. I got I got my cousin-in-law, my nephew-in-law over there. And then he starts negotiating, okay? And he talks them down from 50 men, I don't know, like to 10 or 1. The whole encounter is very human, it's very physical, and I would put that here. The encounter with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I would put that here. What's the next one we got on the list? Joshua. Came to pass, Joshua's in Jericho, and he meets a guy that looks a man standing over him with his sword drawn. And then he says, are you for us or are you against us? The guy doesn't even bother answering the question. He goes, I'm the captain of the host of the Lord. And Joshua fell to his face, worships, and says, what do you need me to do? Basically, shut your mouth, open your ears. And the captain of the Lord of hosts says unto Joshua, loose thy shoes from your foot. The place where thou standest is holy. And he's given instructions. The attitude here is the attitude of a king, of a lion, someone who's issuing law, issuing orders. He's not doing a whole lot of listening. He's doing a whole lot of talking and ordering and assuming military command. He's not asking, he's taking. Okay. Next apparition, what do we have? God showing up to Jacob. If you remember when by the river Yabuk, he shows up to Jacob and he's wrestling with this guy all night long and he loses. He names Israel. He changes his name to Israel saying, you wrestled with God and won. He lets himself get beaten by this guy named Jacob. And look, he blessed him. He changes his name. And at the end, Jacob called the name Peniel because I have seen God face to face and my life is preserved. He knew that he was talking to God. He was surprised that he wasn't dead because, usually when you wrestle with God, the guy could snap and eviscerate you from existence. So he was so surprised that he got away with it, that he wrestled, he won the battle, and at the end, after mistreating him all night long, he even squeezed out a blessing from him. I would say that's a suffering servant. Exactly what we get from the ox. You get blessings from it, and then at the end, you whip it. So God himself, in the Old Testament, in the New, is showing himself in 4 quadrants. Divinity and physical flesh, Son of God and Son of Man, suffering servant, conquering king, Lion of Judah. Okay? Now, what happens when we look at only a couple of quadrants here? Let's look at the 4 main world religions. Do we have a religion on this planet, big one, that talks about God as a great God, powerful God, spiritual God, and who has a physical representation of him riding a white horse? Does that remind you of any religion? Who? Islam. That's literally what it is. You have God is great. You have a prophet on a white horse. Islam approaches the quadrant from this side here. That's where it approaches it. What about a rabbinic Judaism? Rabbinic Judaism is waiting for a Messiah that is going to establish the kingdom to Israel, like a guy named like David, or a guy like Solomon, or a guy like Moses. And they're waiting for a human being. Their Messiah is not divine. I told you that it's abhorrent to them, the idea that the Messiah is divine. To them, the Messiah is physical. He's a man, and he's a king, and he's going to establish Israel as a throne, and that's it. Anything more, you guys are losing your mind. They do have a little concept of a suffering servant. It's called Messiah ben Joseph. But he's so downplayed that most Jews don't even know about the concept anymore. You have to really dig into their literature to find it. So I would say that rabbinic Judaism comes in from this quadrant here. What about Buddhism and Hinduism? Buddhism and Hinduism, do they believe in one all-powerful God? No, they got 1,000,000 gods. Jesus, he's okay, just another 1,000,001. They love the physical. They As a matter of fact, you keep getting reincarnated over and over and over, and it's always here. And they got the suffering part down pat. I mean, they look at Gandhi. He'll stop eating for 40 days just to make a point. They'll pour gas. They'll go in the middle of the street, pour gasoline on themselves, light themselves on fire, and that's like thumbs up in the religion. The more you suffer, the better you are, the holier you are. They have no problems with beasts of burdens. Most of those pictures of the beast of burden were probably in Asian cultures. So I would venture to say that Hinduism and Buddhism come in from this quadrant here. And that leaves Christianity. Now, I always label it Orthodox Christianity because we're breaking it up into Western Christianity and Eastern Orthodoxy. That's out of the 2.5 billion people that call themselves Christian, most of them fall under either Eastern or Western Christianity. And then there's those Protestants that have about 200 or 300 million of them. But let's pull up if you type in Jesus in Google, look at the picture, the first picture that shows up of the Christian Messiah is this guy. Now let's pay attention to this guy. I call him the Michael Jackson of Messiahs. Why? Because you don't know if he's a male or a female. Notice? Bottom half is male, but over here he's a female. Michael Jackson, we don't know if he was white or black. This guy, we don't know if he's Jewish or if he's Greek. Okay? I've been to Israel lots of times, especially in Atlanta, Judea. There's not anybody who looks like that. Now, you go to Scandinavia, and maybe you'll find a couple of guys that look like that. But notice he's got wounds in his hand. The suffering servant part, he's got a broken heart. He's suffering, not very strong. He can barely hold his own hand. Not a kingly dude, not a manly dude, but he is a suffering servant. I mean, he's got his hands pierced. And notice the halo. The halo is always a sign of what? Divinity. So he's a divine suffering servant. He's a divine suffering servant. Christianity comes in from this angle. And that's why we're diametrically opposed to the Jews. We're trying to sell that guy to someone who wants exactly the opposite. They want a conquering king who's a human, and this guy is no conquering. He's not very manly. He's not going to conquer anything or anybody. Now, if you want to get forgiven and if you want grace, this guy provides grace and mercy. But as far as a man of law, this is not a man of law. Okay, so we have the quadrants defined. Now let's start filling in some blanks. For example, we can give some numerical scores. Man's sovereignty up here is 0. Okay, down here it's 10. Over here, man controls everything. Up here, God controls everything. So let's put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's the sovereignty scale of man. The higher you go, the more things get divine. The lower you go, the more things get human. Humility. Oh, over here, these guys are a 10 on the humility scale. Kings, lions, people like Alexander the Great, they don't get it. They get a 0 on the humility scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. God's sovereignty. Well, over here we have a 10. God gets a total score over here. To these people like Bill Gates, Richard Branson, these billionaires, pull up some quotes, Phil, from these billionaires. See what they think about God's sovereignty. They don't mix God with the Bible. Basically, Bill Gates goes on record saying, yeah, a little bit of religion is good, but I don't really know how it would change any decisions that I make on my everyday life. Richard Branson, Steve Jobs. Maybe there is a God, 50-50 chance, maybe. Bill Gates, there's a lot more I could be doing on Sunday morning. George Soros, I respect all faiths, but I'm an atheist. Where does it say that he's an atheist? Identifies himself as an atheist. You see, as you get into this quadrant here, these people are not waiting to go to heaven. They're taking control of the earth now. They want to rule. They're going to make their stand here in the physical. And God either does not exist, or if he does, he does got nothing to do with me. And he couldn't care less about me. I couldn't care less about him. It's just a good fairy tale maybe to teach your kids until they really mature and figure out that the physical realm is all that matters. Okay, what else do we have? Ideologies. Let's start putting ideologies into the...
I mean, lots of...
Oh, you want to hear? Yeah, let's hear. I'll give you some background. This guy is Charles Branson, the owner of Virgin Atlantic. They asked him, do you ever pray? He goes, well, one time I prayed. I was traveling across the Atlantic, and there was a 99.9% chance that I was going to die because my balloon was falling down. So I decided to pray. And then the liberal host goes, and then what happened? He goes, well, then I made it. And he goes, and what did you pray about? He goes, God, if you exist, help me get to the other side, and then I'll maybe look into the fact if you exist, if you really do exist. And then he asks, did you do that when you got there? He goes, no, not really. He forgot all about the promise. Go ahead, push play. He's an interesting character.
He's a humanitarian, who loves people. Maybe one day somebody will be able to convince me that there is a God and there is a particular God. But to me, I love people, and that's to me the most important thing.
Do you ever pray?
I found myself on one of my balloon trips where I was 99% definitely going to die, crossing the Pacific. Everything had gone wrong that could go wrong. There seemed to be no way out of it, and I think there was a little bit of sort of saying, if you exist, I'll be really grateful if you can get me to the other side of the Pacific. And
despite the fact that you survived that, Richard, with the 0.1%, you still don't believe.
Well,
it's a bit churlish, isn't it?
I would love to believe, and I think it's very comforting to believe.
Okay. The idea that believing in God is comforting. It's like, a pillow. It's like your baby blanket. It's comforting. It's good to have. But when it comes down to the real things that matter in the world, the divinity is for people of less IQ. Look at the idea. He at the beginning he talked about he loves evolution. Evolution. I think evolution is magnificent. The theory of evolution, of course, removes God completely. The theory of evolution is 100% physical, and it's 100% man. That's all. It's all you have is man, physical, and we came from the physical, and there's no divinity at all. So evolution falls right here. What about secular humanism? Secular humanism literally means that man can do it without God. We are separate from God, don't know, don't need him, don't want him. The whole idea of secular humanism is that we do not need God. What is at the opposite end of the spectrum? The opposite end of the spectrum is the idea that God is sovereign. He decides everything. Man decides nothing, and without God, we can't do anything. We break Christianity up into quadrants. Let's do a triangle here. 80% is Orthodox and Western Catholic, Western and Eastern Orthodox. And about 20 or 25% is Protestant. Now the Protestants define themselves. They came into the idea of fighting with 5 sola ideas: sola scriptura, sola gratia, sola fide, and sola gloria. The idea that only God and only his desire counts. Humanity's desire and wishes and actions don't count at all. It's only God who promotes, who moves things forward, who creates. And in essence, we are nothing but a tail that follows along with zero authority whatsoever. And notice that is at the pinnacle exact opposite of secular humanism. Secular humanism teaches that man is complete in and of himself, doesn't need God for anything. Solo Deo Gloria means that God is complete in and of himself, doesn't need man for anything. And then there's the idea of sola gratia. We also brought that in as the Protestant, that we're saved by grace alone. What's the opposite of being saved by grace alone? Works. And so sola gratia is up here. It's divinity, it's suffering servant, and the opposite, of course, is it's only works. It's if you want something done, you have to get it done yourself. If it's to be, be it up to me. What's the song? If it is to be it up to me. These people take possession, take control of the physical realm. These guys are relying on God to do it. The song from the lyrics of the Beatles song, Let It Be. Can you pull that up, Phil? The lyrics of the Beatles song? I don't know if I did. If you pay attention to those lyrics, what he's merging a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Christianity. What he's saying is what you're going to learn to be happy is when you let things go. You just let things be. Don't worry about trying to change this or trying to conquer that. I find myself in times of trouble. Mother Mary, he's a Catholic. He's praying to Mother Mary. In my time of darkness right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be, let it be. When the brokenhearted, when people are divided, what's the solution to everything? Is it take charge and do something? No, it's the exact opposite. Let it be, relax, do nothing, and sit back. So either God's going to take care of all of it, or in the Hindu and the Buddhism world, where you just kind of get used to the mess. And happiness is when you're wallowing in your pile of dirt, and you choose and you learn to be happy, and that's when you reach nirvana, when the spirit separates from the physical so much that you learn to be happy even in the mess. Notice the complete opposite of people like Bill Gates or Elon Musk or Larry Ellison. These guys don't think like that. These guys, if there's a problem, they're going to work to fix it. They're not going to wait for God to do anything. They're going to do it themselves. What about sola fide? What's important is what you believe. These guys, they don't think that way. What they think is what's important is what you do. We've gone to the point now of saying I could change my sex depending on what I believe. It doesn't matter what reality says. If I believe I'm a man, I'm a man. If I believe I'm a girl, I'm a girl. I try to convince my wife that I weigh 170 instead of 200 because I identify myself with being 170. It's called translender. Right? Okay, well, as long as you believe it. As long as you believe it, that's what counts. Reality, physical reality, has absolutely nothing to do with it. As long as I believe it, therefore it is. Sola Scriptura was another thing that the Protestants came over and said, all Sola Scriptura, only the Bible is to be held as God's instructions. What's the opposite of Sola Scriptura? Sola tradition. Okay? What the Bible says doesn't count. It's what my culture, my country, my people, my tradition has done over the course of time in the physical realm, in the human experience of things. And this God guy's got nothing to tell me because we figured this all alone, and we've built up human knowledge over the course of time, and my works and my traditions are very, very important to me. What else? What other ideas can we start putting around in the circle? Look at ideologies like, I got to pray about it. You ever meet those guys that can't make a decision what to order at the McDonald's menu without praying to God about it? Okay, they got to pray to God about everything. They're very dependent on God. They're over here. God decides everything, so I should pray if I should order the Big Mac or the double cheeseburger. Okay, What's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is I don't need God to decide anything. I could decide everything on my own. And asking him for advice is a waste of time or it's stupid. Over here, I don't need him. And over here, he doesn't need me. Okay? Kind of like husband and wife. Over here, you got the wife ruling the roost. Over here, you got the husband ruling the roost. Now let's look at the more centrist positions, where you have a normal family where husband and wife co-rule the house together. Let's look at a more centrist position where God and man are co-ruling this garden, where Adam is given the ability and the authority to keep the garden, to dress the garden, and then he actually gives him the word dominion. God hands over dominion to this Adam. It's kind of like the husband, gets married, and he hands his paycheck, his name, his signature authority, hands it over to his wife, and now whatever she signs actually binds him. Legally, that's what happens. And it's like, well, why would a guy ever do that? Well, because he loves her. Why would God ever let go of his authority and sovereignty and mix it up with guys that are down here? Well, probably for the same reason. He's the husband, we're the wife. So if you want to understand what he's looking for, what he's looking as far as a relationship between humanity and the divine realm, start thinking more of a centrist position. For example, he tells the children of Israel, go over there and conquer everybody. And then he says, Moses, you have to hold your hands up, because if your hands drop, you're going to start losing the battle. Like, you're going to go through all the hassle of employing the heavenly realm and all these angels to kill all these Philistines, and then you have to ask Moses, but you got to hold your hands up. It's like, what does he need? Why do you need that? It's like, just do the whole thing, you know? Joshua, he blows the trumpet, the walls come tumbling down on Jericho, and the enemies are scattering all over the place, and yet he tells Joshua and the children of Israel, go over there and do some fighting and do some conquering. He's always mixing what needs to be done. He does not do it all. He doesn't just drop a boat in the middle of the earth. He tells Noah to get a bunch of trees and bang them together for 100 years, be a framer for 100 years, and he lets Noah build a boat. He's always doing things in conjunction with us. He said another way, we can't do it without him, and he won't do it without us. We cannot build that boat without him. We literally wouldn't know how to do it. And yet he doesn't build it without human beings agreeing with his will and getting that boat built. And the story of the scriptures is basically the entire thing of where he's negotiating, whether it's Jacob who's toiling for a wife, or whether it's God himself who's toiling for humanity as his bride. You see this desire to co-rule and co-reign together. What else do we have? Look at the conflicts, the specific conflicts between Judaism and Christianity. You want to play this one? This one makes fun of both Christianity and Orthodox Judaism. Now, hold on, let me give you a little background. This lady she's gone through some sad times. I think there's been a death in the family. A guy named Abe has died. So she's looking for answers for the death. And this is a Orthodox Jewish rabbi. Now, yes, it's female because this is coming from a left perspective, so they're trying to be avant-garde having a female rabbi. But pay attention to the Jewish perspective towards heaven, towards hell, towards physicality, and towards the spiritual realm. And then it's going to change camera to a baptism, a Christian baptism, and we're going to see the approach that Christianity is going to try to answer the same questions. Okay.
That is nice to think of, but there is no heaven.
Really?
No hell either.
Really? No matter how much bad someone's done or how many people you've hurt?
Well, in the Jewish faith, if you hurt someone, you've got to try to make amends. Find a way to compensate for what you've done wrong.
Okay, pause and start it again. Notice that in the Jewish faith, we don't care about heaven and hell. We care about if you're doing something wrong, you fix it, and you fix it now, here on earth, in the physical realm. We're not heavenly minded. We're earthly minded. We take care of business here on earth. Okay? There is no heaven, there is no hell. In the Jewish faith, we get our justice by fixing things here on earth. And notice that she was actually shocked when she says, there's no heaven, there's no hell. She's actually shocked, like even though you've done a bunch of bad things, there's a sense of injustice in her heart that his answer, or her, BLT, oh, that's the sandwich. There's a sense in her heart that she's not satisfying with her answer. The lack of spirituality, the lack of the spiritual dimension is just not sitting well with her. So let's listen to it again, paying attention to that.
That is nice to think of, but there is no heaven.
Really?
No hell either.
Really? No matter how much bad someone's done or how many people you've hurt?
Well, in the Jewish faith, if you've hurt someone, you've got to try to make amends. Find a way to compensate for what you've done wrong.
Thank you.
Shalom. Okay, now we got the Christian side. Pay attention, diametrically opposite ideas. Okay? You got to make amends in the physical realm. Now we're going to go to the Christian ideology. There's a baptism going on, and the little brother's being baptized.
We now wash away the original sin.
What's original sin?
Basically, we're all born guilty and sinful. And when we get baptized, it's like we get a do-over. Then, all you have to do is ask for forgiveness and you get a clean slate. Isn't that nice?
You get it? You see how all you got to do is believe and you get a do-over. Isn't that nice? And this is the mom, the lady that's shaking her head. That was her son. This lady, this is her son, and the guy who's getting baptized is her son. So she's in trauma, listening to the religious Christian aunt or something, teaching religion to her son. She's like, oh my goodness, is that what we are doing here? And then she's like, isn't that nice? To her, this was absolutely beautiful. To her, it's complete and utter nonsense. Let's listen to it again. Theodore Harding, we're going to take care of your original sin right now.
Theodore Harding, we now wash away the original sin.
Pause.
What's original sin?
We take away original sin. Why? Because we said so. You don't have to repent. You don't have to stop doing it. You don't have to do anything in the physical world. No works at all. All you got to do is believe it. And once you believe it, it becomes so. Translender. All you got to do is believe it. Okay. And then this guy, he's an atheist. He's just like, hey, I just want to know what's original sin. Let's finish up.
Basically, we're all born guilty and sinful. Then when we get baptized, it's like we get a do-over. Then all you have to do is ask for forgiveness and you get a clean slate. Isn't that nice?
Okay, now if you want to see the rest of the video, go talk to Phil after class, because her next line is epic, but we can't play it because it's rated R. The point is that the look on her face says exactly what she thinks of this philosophy, and I'm trying to show the diametric opposition of these two faiths, of why we're having trouble selling our religion to them, and they're having trouble selling their religion to us. Not that they even try. They don't bother proselytizing because you guys are so out of whack. When you start believing something that's that crazy, it's like you're beyond redemption. I can't even talk to you. Okay, so what are we missing? We talked about the idea of life after death, the Christian idea that we're leaving, we're going to heaven. When we die, we go to heaven. We leave, we're escape artists. We're going to a spiritual domain. The Jews are waiting for someone to clean up the earth here on earth. Jesus, the Messiah, the biblical Jesus, not the Christian Jesus. I have to make a distinction between rabbinic Judaism and pagan Christianity. I have to make a distinction. Why? Because biblical Judaism is actually the same religion as biblical Christianity. They're one and the same. So the minute that you start polarizing, the minute you start pulling them away from this quadrant, now you could actually split them into two different realms. And they are seriously different religions, and we hate them, they hate us. I just heard tonight from our Jewish friend that his mom owns a lot of restaurants in the Bible Belt. And she goes, it is amazing that the sale of bacon, he goes, there's a day of the week where the sale of bacon peaks. Guess what day of the week? The sale of bacon, Saturday. I mean, I go, you got to get me this. The bacon sales, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. That's the sale of bacon. Now, this is a Jewish lady, Orthodox Jewish lady who owns restaurants in the Bible Belt. She's looking at her reports, and she's wondering why they have to stock up on bacon every Saturday. And she's like, my goodness, what is it with you people? I mean, it's like the recipe of bacon-wrapped scallops. I mean, it's like you're doing it by design. You're just to get on somebody's nerves. Now, of course, you go to most Orthodox Jews, and they think that the two most important things that they love, and they pride themselves, is you keep Shabbat and you keep kosher laws. It's diet and Saturday. Bible Belt. When do we eat the most amount of bacon? On Saturday. So you see how we're getting polarized into, instead of drinking from the same source. For example, this image tonight, I pulled it from the Gospels, I pulled it from the book of Revelation, I pulled it from the book of Ezekiel, I pulled it from the book of Genesis, I pulled it from the Jewish, this comes from the Jewish tradition. The Jewish encyclopedia has this information. So culturally, there's really no reason why we have all these separations. It's when we start changing the definitions of God, only looking at two of them, or three of them, or one of them, then you start getting into perversions of God. Or it's no longer Jesus, it's a different Jesus. It's no longer this divine being, it's a different divine being. It's no longer a conquering king. Now he could be a tyrant or a dictator, like Alexander the Great, like Napoleon, like Hitler, like the Caesars, all those guys who fit these descriptions. Why do we like George Washington? Because after he wins the battle, he took his authority and handed it over to somebody. Isn't that something that we really appreciated about George? He wasn't a hog of authority. He's like, okay, now that the job is done. And he moved a little bit towards being a servant, just being a regular citizen. Center yourself on somewhere in between and try to avoid the perimeter of the spectrum. Also, keep in mind that even though Satan has been pushing us towards these extremes, he also has to unify the world and bring us to this center, and he has to do it in a counterfeit way. We talked about that in the other Bible studies. But in order for him to unite all of mankind under one religion, one political system, one governmental authority, one financial system, he's going to have to unify people. So these differences between these quadrants, he's going to have to come up with a jerry-rigged solution to unite and to get this guy to hang out with that guy and to get this guy to hang out with that guy without actually repenting, without actually loving your neighbor, without actually loving God, without actually submitting any authority towards Jehovah. He has to keep people in the blind, in the darkness, and he has to fake a centrist position. But the true God that is described in the scriptures has elements of all four. And if you remove 1, 2, 3, you no longer have the same being. You have a created being of your culture, your imagination, your nation, your religion, your whatever. let's see, let me go through my notes, see what we forgot.
So is there a meaning to the number 4?
To the number 4?
There's a meaning to the number 4, because you're saying
I don't know if there's a meaning to the number 4.
there's a significance to number 4.
I don't know what the significance is.
Because there's
What, the cross?
Well, there's the 4 gospels.
There's the 4 gospels.
There's the 4 attributes.
And they're opposites. You understand, a suffering servant is exactly the opposite of a conquering king. This guy rides a white horse. That guy, he drives a donkey. They just don't look like the same guy. This guy, he drives a donkey. That guy drives a Bentley. Divine, single, full authority, all powerful, omniscient, all-knowing. And you're telling me that a being who has all power and all authority is going to come down in the form of a physical human being, limit himself, be born in a manger, broke, no money, not even Motel 6 rates? It's like, why would he do that? So I think it's the opposite of the spectrum that you're forced to deal with. Now, when you see this image, you're like, okay, what's animals? But when you actually think about it in terms of divinity, in terms of humanity and physical realm, in terms of suffering servant, in terms of conquering king, it actually helps you build an intimacy towards him. It also helps you become a more complete person yourself. Husband and wife, for example, the minute that the husband starts acting like he's over here, and the wife is only over here, you get those pictures, was it in Japan or somebody, where the woman walks like 10 feet behind the man? He decides everything. He decides where we go, how we go, where we go, and she just follows along like a tail, and she decides nothing. And we look at that like, that's a weird image of a marriage. It's supposed to be side by side, took him out of his side, husband and wife walking side by side. That looks normal. The minute that you have one guy who makes all the decisions and one guy who just follows along, it looks a little weird. So, employee-employer, you could also apply that here too. An employee that's whipped and told and never asked anything, we call him a slave. And the boss, we call him the jerk. We make fun of him in, The Office? What's that show? But I'm not really sure what the significance of 4 is. I think it's the exercises and the exercise of 4 ends of the spectrum, 4, north, east, south, west, and then it's trying to center you towards, hey, think about the opposite side. For example, all grace. Really, could you have a government or an entity that's all grace? Can you run anything without any law? No, you can't. Now, does that mean everything's got to be a committee? Do you know how many submarines have a committee for captains? Or how many planes have a committee at the pilot chair? There's a reason why there's a pilot in command, and there's one captain of a boat, and there's one president to a corporation, and there's one president to a country. At the end, push comes to shove, authority has to be delineated down to one. But that does not mean that you have to have a tyrant. That does not mean that you cannot be co-involved with your constituency. So yes, even though God has ultimate power and ultimate authority, he chooses to dish some of that out, kind of like a rich dad who chooses to distribute some of his wealth over to his children. Now they are partakers of that blessing, and they end up having the authority or a piece of the authority that the dad enjoyed. Okay, so comments. Heresy bell ringing.
I heard a lot on the translander argument there. No, I like what you said in regards to, it was more of a passing comment, but the true biblical Christianity and true biblical Judaism are same in one. And I think that was a huge point to make.
I think if we interpret the two correctly, we're going to come up with a conclusion that Christianity says we have a suffering servant who's going to come back and be a conquering king, and he hasn't done so because he's given mankind a couple thousand years of grace to get your act together. You know, before the whooping, before your daddy comes home and gives you the whooping, the mom comes over and says, hey, let's give the kid another chance to try to get his act together. And so we're in an age of grace right now. Our King has left. He literally took off and left the Holy Spirit here that's kind of everywhere. And he's given us a chance to get back into the way that we should be looking at things. But the point is that it's not unlimited. We love the book of Paul because, you know, in Paul's words, we're saved by grace and we're saved by faith. The Jews, guess which book they love to read if they would read the New Testament?
Deuteronomy.
James.
New Testament.
New Testament. They would love the book of James. You could easily sell the book of James to every Orthodox Jew on the planet. They love it. You're saying what you do is what counts. Forget your faith. Okay, I'll show you your faith by my works, and then we'll compare which one counts more. See, that's Jewish thinking right there. But now let's look at the exaggeration of that. You get into the mindset of only work. So what I do counts, and what I do is the only thing that counts. Really? So you want to try to get to heaven under your own merit? Really? You want to pay for all the sins that you've done? Are you sure you don't need any help in this effort? Are you sure you want to carry the whole weight yourself? Are you sure you don't want to transfer some responsibility over to somebody else by grace? Are you sure?
So if you could, and if and this is just a question to throw out there so you can run with it, is how much work do we need and how much grace do we need? What's the ratio for salvation to be true?
Notice it's how much divinity do you need versus how much humanity do you need? How much physical do you need versus how much spirit do you need? I think being under the law of love, and this circle here is defined by the word love. You don't approach it with how much sin can I get away with and still go to heaven. That already tells me that you're not interested in coming to where He wants to bring you, or you're trying to say how much do I have to do in order to make it. In which case I don't have to say thank you to God. The grace versus works thing. Let's say that your dad told you don't go swimming in the ocean because you're gonna get pulled into and you're gonna drown. And of course you didn't listen and you go. Then your dad gets into a boat in the middle of the night, comes over and saves you right before you drown. And he throws a lifeline to you. Not because you deserve it, because he loves you. He's out there by grace. Then you grab the life preserver, you get in the boat. What's your attitude going to be? Gee, did you see how smart I was when I grabbed that life preserver? Is that what you're going to tell your dad? Look what I did. I grabbed that life preserver. I saved myself. Nobody would talk that way. On the other hand, your dad throws you the life preserver, and you just sit there and say, oh, God, Dad's going to do it all. I just sit here and wait for Dad to pull me in the boat. The minute that your dad sees, you know what? You don't want to get into my boat. After all this, you still do not want to come with me. He might very well let you go. He does not save everybody. You see, He's not an eternal suffering servant. This is not 100% of His character. He does chew up some enemies. And there's a point where you could push your Heavenly Father to the point where you make Him your enemy. There is that point. Who determines that point? Well, He does. But that point is there. And it's not 100% here. He does not forgive everybody. And He does not punish everybody. Some people get forgiven, which is weird for a lion. And some people get condemned, which is weird for a suffering servant.
You mentioned that the Messiah, Ben Joseph, is pretty much all but forgotten within Judaism. Is there a specific reason why in that theology that they don't want a suffering servant as Messiah?
because it points to when you read the characteristics of Messiah ben Joseph means son of Joseph. So you have a guy who's the son of Joseph, and he's a guy who gets whipped, and he's a guy who gets pierced, and he's a guy who gets killed, and he's a guy who suffers for the sins of the nation, and he's a guy who's rejected by his own people. It's the biography, the resume starts to match Jesus of Nazareth so much that it's really troubling. I mean, they take Isaiah 53, and that's like the unread chapter. Isaiah 53 is read in Judaism circles about as much as "don't make statues" is read in Christian circles. When you're in the business of selling statues, you're not going to be quoting, the third commandment. Which one is it? The second commandment. Do we have the commandments that are totally changed? They literally, I think we talked about last time. Okay, you want to talk about Yaakov Fugger. Did we mention him already? Give you another example of the conflict between Judaism and Christianity. Yaakov Fugger, 1498, 1525, richest man on earth during this time. This guy, he's a banker, and he goes to the Vatican. Now think, Jewish guy, okay? He's coming in from over here. He goes to the Vatican in Rome, over here. He goes, you guys are doing really good with this whole selling indulgences thing. You're selling the forgiveness of past sins for money. And you're doing well, you're building some cool buildings. But, he goes, you Gentiles don't know how to make money. The real money is not in the forgiveness of past sins. The money is in forgiving future sins. So he comes up with an idea. He does a 50-50 split with the Vatican, and he comes up with a 10-year sin forgiveness bond. And he sold them. And these guys made so much cash that all the cathedrals that you saw in Europe today are built with this money, and he becomes the richest man on earth. They steal so much money from so many people that Martin Luther gets so upset, he literally starts the Protestant Reformation on the heels of this guy. So this guy is actually credited with one of the, he's like the founding fathers of the, he's the pre-Reformation reformist. And Martin Luther got so upset that his anti-Semitism, he ratcheted up. He wrote a book, Martin Luther, Protestant, okay? Listen to what he says about the Jews. They're full of devil's feces, base, whoring people. There are no people. They boast of lineage circumcision. The law must be accounted as filth. Their synagogues and schools should be set on fire, their prayer books destroyed, their rabbis forbidden to preach, their homes should be destroyed, razed to the ground, their property and money confiscated. Martin Luther makes Hitler look nice to the Jews. They should be shown no mercy or kindness, afforded no legal protection. Poisonous venom worm should be drafted into forced labor or expelled. He also seems to advocate for their murder. We are at fault in not slaying them. If we don't kill them, we're guilty. Now, think of this. You got the Jewish guy who becomes rich, selling indulgences together with the Vatican to poor old grandmas, selling future debt, future sin forgiveness. How many times have we heard it in church? We're forgiven from all sins, past, present, and future. Well, this guy actually made money off of the idea. We weren't the first ones to come up with it. They just actually turned it into some cash. But do you see how once normal, ordinary people get so raped by these ideologies, it's very easy for you to start hating the Jew who came up with the idea. The Protestants start hating Rome for collecting, for capitalizing on the idea. The point is that two selfish people found themselves in, even though ideologically they didn't exist, they didn't agree, but when it came time to stealing a whole bunch of money from a whole bunch of people, and we're talking billions. I mean, this guy was the Bill Gates, this guy was the richest man on earth in that generation. You talking about Martin Luther? Well, anytime you find yourself starving to death, and you find the Jew prospering, you start being motivated. Like what's going on? Maybe I'm poor because he's rich. The socialism comes into the picture. Instead of thinking, actually, no, we're both guilty for this to happen. But then you start shooting at the race. You're not understanding exactly what's causing the pain. So the white guy starts shooting at the black guy, thinking that all of my pain is being caused by the black guy. The black guy starts thinking that all my pain is caused by the white guy.
Such a Bible scholar.
Well, my point to you is that you should know that the Protestant Reformation was founded on ideas like this, and Hitler did not create them. Hitler actually was quoting Martin Luther. I think Kristallnacht, the day that they went around and broke all the glass of all the store owners, and was Martin Luther's birthday. So that was done specifically because this guy was a German. He was a religious leader, and Hitler and the Nazis used that venom to stir up people's emotion and all their hatred. So my point to you is that most people in this room are somewhere in this category here. At least it helps you understand why we're diametrically opposed to them, and they're diametrically opposed to us. Our Jesus they don't like. Their Jesus, which is a guy who gets things done, and he comes back and rules the earth and sets up a kingdom where he's the king of the Jews. We don't like that. Most Christians do not even believe that Jesus is coming back in a physical form, taking a throne in Israel and establishing the throne of David on the planet once again. That's just not in our DNA. So what's the most important thing to them is the most missing thing to us. What's the most important thing to us is the most missing thing to them. And we're diametrically opposed. Did I miss anything? Slides, pictures? All right, more questions, comments? We talked about Gandhi, the orange tablecloth people that pour gasoline on their head. It's in Christianity too. Remember when we used to whip ourselves? The more you whip yourself, the more you get close to heaven. Remember the monks that used to do that? We have, there's people climbing the stairs in the basilica or what you mean on their knees. And by the time they get to the top, their knees are bloody. And the idea is the more you suffer, suffering is good. It's acts of contrition. That's the formal name for it.
Can you explain maybe the difference then in ideology between Islam and rabbinic Judaism in regards to that lion then?
You mean the conflict between these two quadrants?
Right, in regards to the lion aspect, because I feel like they probably share more than they disagree with in regards to that aspect, no?
They don't have a problem with the lion taking over. The difference is, to the Muslim, it's not the Lion of Judah. The Messiah is not Jewish. He's from Ishmael. So they both want a lion, but we're disagreeing on who the lion is. One guy is from the tribe of Judah, and one is from the tribe of Ishmael. So the idea of a one strong man coming over and taking the world by force is in their DNA, but now we're arguing over who it is. However, in this realm here, that idea, that strong man is not even preached. We're taught, we die, we go to heaven, we're leaving. This planet is all going to get burned, it's all going to get thrown away, nothing physical is going to get redeemed. There is no reestablishment of the throne of Israel. We're not going to have 1,000 years, literally, where Jesus is going to be on earth, with the cell phone from Jerusalem telling the whole world what to do. That's just not in our DNA. But that's what that book says. This lion is going to redeem this planet. He's not going to take us off the planet. He's going to fix this earth. Then he's going to give you a new earth. But before he gives you a new one, to show the universe that he's actually qualified to rule it, he has to play with the same set of cards that Satan's been playing with. You can't be dealt a different hand. So he has to fix, in 1,000 years, he has to fix the mess that Satan and mankind have made over the last 6,000 years. And once he shows us that he can do that, at that point it's going to be obvious who our loving Messiah, who our loving God is. He's got the capability to do it, and he's got the love and the desire, and he's got the care for me. He has the power and the authority to do it, and he's got the humility to do it even as a man. He's not doing it as Superman. You know, the idea, well, Jesus went to the cross. Yeah, he was God. You know, if you give me divinity, I could do it too. It's like for Superman to jump above, tall buildings with a single bound. Not that hard. Give me those powers, I could do it too. But going to the cross in the flesh, doing what you're doing in the flesh, now that requires a certain level of moral fortitude, and that's the kind of God that makes me want to bow down and worship in awe and wonder. And you go, yeah, I'll give that guy blind obedience. I'll submit. I'll marry him. Yeah, I'll be his wife. But the God that is in this quadrant, very distant. He's not a guy that sits down and plays with his 2-year-old boy. The dad is far away. He sends you a check. He takes care of the family, but he's not intimate. There's no intimacy. I say, these guys have Allah, and these guys have Abba. You know what Abba means?
Yeah, father.
Daddy.
Yeah.
It means daddy.
More intimate. Abba, father, right?
Yeah.
From what I understand, a lot of Judaism, Rabbinic Judaism, they don't believe in a real personal relationship with God either, though.
They don't believe in a personal, where God comes down in the form of a man. Or that they don't believe that this guy in front of me is divine. They believe in a guy like David, who's a great guy, a guy like Moses, who's a great guy. But it's not God. I mean, don't get confused here, boys. That's what they actually say, that's you're breaking the laws of monotheism. The minute you bring God from heaven and put him in the form of a human body, you've now created another God, and that's against the tenets of Judaism. So they cannot stomach the idea of the Messiah being divine. We have two arguments with them. One is who the Messiah is. Is it Jesus of Nazareth or is it not? And two is what the Messiah is. They do not attribute any divinity to the Messiah. He's just a man. They separate humanity and physicality from God. They just cannot bridge this gap here. And I think that's almost a bigger fight. If you could bridge that gap, which of course this entire presentation does, by us showing you that this image that's in Ezekiel, when God shows up at the different times, the Bible verses that we were quoting are all Old Testament, including their own tribes, their own culture is showing you these images. It's kind of a hint that, hey, maybe the Messiah is divine. But you have to be willing to let go of your tradition to see it. Because once you get stuck in one of these quadrants, man, if you've ever been to India or China, there's a fight between, look at the conflict that we have with China. That's over here. Once you get stuck in one of these quadrants, it's very difficult to get out. You think that, you could just hop from one to the other. When you're born and raised, then you're baked. You're baked in one of these quadrants. Most people on the planet are Buddhists and Hindus because they were born in this quadrant. Most people are Rabbinic Jews because they were born in this quadrant. Most people are Muslims because they were born in this quadrant. And most people are Christians because they were born in this quadrant. So there's not a lot of mobility going around here. You are stuck unless you start thinking what really is a loving being. How is he trying to communicate with me? And you start getting your nose into that book, you won't break free from the gravitational pull of the perimeter of this circle is so strong that it takes a loving heart to break free from it. If you do not have it, you won't break free from it. You'll die and your kids will be born and it'll perpetuate like it does in most of our nations.
Ideally, you like to go closer to the center?
Loving humanity is here. Yeah, you want to be a loving husband, you better be here. You want to love your God, the God of the Scriptures is here. The Messiah is here.
Difference in like theology between our Catholic parents, mom, our Dubai, Muslim.
When we travel the world, we talk to, our family is very heavily here. We go to the Arab world, and we're talking to this generation, the grandpa. He's like, man, that guy, he talks exactly like my grandpa. And then they never even heard of each other, but philosophically they think that what they value, how they reason, how they put facts together is very much the same. And the Jews in Israel too. It's tradition. We make fun of them when, Fiddler on the Roof? Tradition? Well,
but
tradition was very important.
identical.
It's identical.
Yeah, they process information and their inability to step outside their little bubble.
Tradition is very blinding. As a matter of fact, the rejection of Jesus, they say that he was anti-Torah. But really, was he anti-Torah? If you pay attention, and Botiak was honestly enough to say it, he goes, what he was breaking was their oral traditions. But that was enough to get on everybody's nerve, because if the oral tradition is all you see, and this guy's not respecting it, he's not respecting our culture, so he's not a good guy. But he did not break the Torah. He was one Torah law-abiding man. He obeyed it perfectly. He's the only human being on earth that ever did. Because the tradition, what's the exact verbiage? You've made the law of God of none effect because of your tradition. So there's a point where the traditions start to dwarf and replaces, and we did that in Christianity as well. Christianity was born here, and we slowly moved it, and by the year 300, we were here. It took us 200 or 300 years to move Christianity from the center to here. Just like Israel, by the way. Israel starts here, and within 200-300 years, they moved here. And then they had to get a chance. They got destroyed. The Babylonians, God brings them back, tries to recenter them, and then slowly, after a couple hundred years, they drifted right back there. There's a huge gravitational pull to get away from here. Satan makes it very uncomfortable for you to live here.
So would you say on the outside is all secular humanism?
On the outside is all secular humanism. I think it's you know what it is. It's satanic humanism. There's spiritual forces that are pulling you here. It's not only humanity and physicality that's pulling you here. There are spiritual. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We wrestle against principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. But it's not completely secular. There's a spiritual dimension that the demonic realm is helping you along and pulling you on the outskirts of this and away from your loving relationship with your Father. And the earth, the world, the flesh, and the devil make it very uncomfortable for you to be here. The Holy Spirit wants you to be here, loves it when you're here, and this is when you feel totally fulfilled.
But I don't understand how they could be so diametrically opposed.
Who's they?
All the religions, the four, and then all of a sudden now they're all coming together.
That's the genius of what's happening under our very eyes for the first time in history.
Now they're all agreeing.
Yes.
And they're all saying, well, we're all the same.
Yes.
And we all worship the same God.
Yes.
So how can that be and that be at the same time?
Well, like I said, Satan's been trying different ideas for 6,000 years, and he's finally figuring out how to bring the whole world under one hat. But it is happening. I mean, through holidays, through the environmental movement. We've destroyed.
There's wars over this religion. There's been wars over all these doctrines.
Yes, but now we're moving towards unity. We're not moving towards separation. The only people that are being pushed towards wars right now are the fringes, or the fanatics, like the right-wing Islamic fanatic. That guy, Osama, Saddam, and those guys need to be killed. But most Muslims are okay. Same thing with the radical guy needs to go. But most Buddhism and Hinduism can be brought in. Same thing with Christianity. There's the radical right that is vicious, and same thing in Judaism. There's always a little fringe that gets ostracized, but the majority is coming together under one hat. I would be an example of someone who is outside of this effort of unification.
So it goes with the whole tolerance
Yeah,
of gender.
Of ideology. The only ideology that won't be tolerated is this one. There's going to be a humongous level of tolerance as long as you're anywhere in the donut. You understand? As long as you're here, there's going to be lots of tolerance. But the minute you try to move your life and your behavior into this area, you're going to be a terrorist. You're going to be a heretic. You're going to be a weirdo. You're going to be a wacko. They're going to put you on a cross. They're going to kill you. You know, they're going to hang you upside down.
That's the perfect balance of everything. You would think that would be the opposite.
Well, in the millennium, in the 1,000 years where Jesus is running, people will be rewarded for being here. In this day and age, when Satan's running the planet, people over here are punished. They're killed. They're mutilated. They're eaten at the Colosseum. Their books are burned. Or their money is taken from them. They're persecuted every sense of the word. The people over here, for example, you know, those guys that we're showing, those are billionaires. I believe in evolution. The money, the reward, the fame, the Hollywood, everything that they stand for is always on the outskirts, and Satan rewards you from being here. Two different kingdoms. The main genius of what he's pulling, what Lucifer's got to pull off, is the unification of different ideologies that don't really fit together, and how he's going to put all these cats underneath one hat. That's genius. And he's tried it several times. Notice, and failed. He failed with Rome. He failed with Greece. He failed with the Persians, and he failed with Egypt and Babylon. But he's getting better at it. The idea of one currency today is closer than ever before. I mean, they're literally talking about it with cryptocurrency. Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, he literally could flip on a switch right now. You'd have a global currency called Libra, and the whole world would use it. He has that much clout. Yeah.
Wasn't he the one who divided everybody in the first place, who made all the different religions? Or
Who he?
Lucifer.
Lucifer divides. God's people are being divided by Lucifer, and they're being united by God. God wants unity for his people. Lucifer wants division for God's people. God divides Satan's people. The Tower of Babel, the division of languages, that was God doing the dividing. Jesus says, I came here not to unite, to divide. So when it comes to God's kingdom, Satan is trying to divide. When it comes to Satan's kingdom, God's doing the dividing. So there's no holiness in dividing or unity. You have to just see which side of the fight you're on. If you're a Nazi, you want all your German guys to get together and shoot at the French guy.
Isn't it going to be easy for Lucifer to bring everybody together because he's the one who made all the outskirts of each religion?
Well, it's funny how they all kind of fit in the one quadrant or another. When we were doing this, it's like, gee, is it a coincidence that these things kind of fall in there? So yeah, I think Lucifer's the one who's been dividing but now he has to reunite. So he's kind of got to put the toothpaste back in the tube. If he wants to be worshipped, as a global world leader, he's going to have to unite everybody. And Jesus does the same thing, by the way. Okay, the whole idea of him coming back and starting a kingdom based out of Israel, everybody's going to have one Lord. There is going to be unity of religion during the millennium. There's not going to be a sharing of authority. There's not going to be a democratic voting process. The law is already written. We're just going to be enforcing what's already been written. That is going to be the constitution of the entire planet. As weird as that sounds.
Whether you agree with it or not.
Whether you agree with it or not. Just like if you go to Dubai today, and you want to go around dressed in a bathing suit in the mall, they're not going to let you do that. Cop's going to come over and say, ma'am, if you don't cover up, we're going to put you in jail. So whether you agree with the law or not, you're expected to obey it.
I couldn't even hold your hand. The cop got me at the shopping center. He was a security guard.
Yeah, he came over and
he's like,
public display of affection is not allowed.
Are you kidding? I've been married to this dude for 20 years. I could not hold his hand in public.
He actually said that.
Yeah, he said. No affection.
Yeah.
In Dubai or in Abu Dhabi?
I think it was Abu Dhabi.
It was Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
But see, there's good and there's evil. You go down to the boardwalk in San Diego, and we have the opposite problem. Okay, you're going up and down Dubai. There's no such thing as a strip club. There's no such thing as a what do you call the palm reading store, the witchcraft, all that nonsense. You can't even get a building permit for it. They wouldn't even tolerate. You want to get an abortion, you can't do it. There's no such thing as Planned Parenthood. So they're in a lot of areas, they're like, wow, a little bit of law, a little bit of the lion is exactly what we need here. When the building permit for a Chick-fil-A in an airport is more difficult to get than a strip club in Vegas, you see that we have lost our nuggets when it comes to law and grace. We are no longer being graceful when we need to be graceful, and we're no longer being lawful when it comes to having to be lawful. We're losing our center.
Well, they're redefining the center.
They're redefining the center.
When you were saying before about like when all the religions unite, could be Satan, but it's also the same way, like you said, when the lion comes down and tries to unite everybody too. So it's going to be a fine line to know which one is which.
That's exactly what I've been trying to say. Both beings are trying to do the same thing. So there's going to be some overlap in their plays. They're both trying to move the football to the exact same point. They both want to be worshipped as God on earth. One guy is doing it because he deserves it and because he loves you, and the other guy's doing it because he stole it. He literally stole it from Adam, and he doesn't want to give it back. It's like you gave your kid your inheritance. His loser friend took it from him, and you're now working to try to get it back into the proper own it. And the kid who has it doesn't want to let go. Satan does not want to let go of the power and the authority and the kingdom that he has. And he's happy.
And his life seems easy, like to a lot of people.
And he seems to be winning. He's not letting go. And when Jesus comes over and tries to say, I'm going to put a kibosh to the whole thing, the first thing he did is he tried to negotiate. Hey, relax. What can we do? And then, of course, when he didn't strike a deal, he killed him. But he did try to negotiate first.
One of the things that you mentioned in past classes, the difference between that kingdom is being love thy neighbor and then love thyself as the opposite. Lucifer being that love thyself, which you can kind of see all on the outskirts of those things, and then the love thy neighbor you can put in the middle of that, where you see the perfect love thy neighbor in Jesus, where he reaches out to all Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and Rabbinic Judaism.
Yeah.
From the middle.
Yeah. In fact, when you read Jesus talking, Jesus just ignores all of this stuff. He cut through all of it. The woman at the well shows up, and she was a Samaritan. And she's like, I thought Jews don't talk to us. I thought Protestants don't talk to Catholics. I thought Jews don't talk to Muslims. I thought Muslims don't talk to... He cut through all of this nonsense and just went right to the heart of the matter. If you were here, he moved you here. If you were here, he moved you here. He was always moving people here no matter what. He just ignored whatever, you're sick, you're physically untouchable. He ignored all of that stuff and cut right through it. But the Jesus of the Jesus of Nazareth, the Jesus of the King of the Jews, the Jesus that talked about in that book has absolutely nothing to do with the Jesus of this religion. It's two different Jesuses. It started with two different Jesuses, Jesus Barabbas and Jesus of Nazareth, and we are still in that division today. Type in Jesus. Look at all the different pictures. There's the Mormon one. By the way, the Mormon one is actually more manly than the Christian one. If you ever go to UTC, not UTC, the mall in La Jolla, where the Kosher Ralph's is, there's a store that's Mormon paraphernalia. Look in there, look at their artwork, and see how they characterize him. You want to type in LDS Jesus? I think it's this one. It's this one. See, they put the manliness back in, and they took he's not a Michael Jackson anymore.
He got more man.
He got more man. They actually believe in the kingdom, and they got away from from this idea.
Why did the Catholics make it feminine?
The Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox make him more feminine because the theology is based on divinity and a suffering servant. It's not based on a kingdom that is being established here in the future. They think that the kingdom got established already and it's slowly getting built because the amount of Christians on the planet is growing. They think that the kingdom got planted 2,000 years ago and it's growing nicely. You understand? So that would mean that South America is part of the kingdom. You want to show a picture of what a slum in Brazil looks like? Yeah, Brazilian slum. Let's look at the kingdom that this because there you go. It's blow one of these pictures up. Does this look like a kingdom? I mean, if the king gives you this, the king don't know what he's doing. Now put your screensaver, the Dubai screensaver that Apple uses. Is that a standard image? The reason why that image is put is because it's the closest thing that we have to the picture of heaven on earth. Is that center city? Yeah, it's that. Yeah, put a picture of that and put that one, if you can, put it next to Brazil. See? Now we can imagine what heaven on earth looks like, but the day that the whole world looks like this, I think that, King knows what he's doing. Yeah, you see the contrast? However, if we preach that Jesus' kingdom has already started, this is Jesus' kingdom because all of South America is basically 98% Christian. Well, if that's, what was the lady in Ireland? If that's the millennium, then the millennium really sucks. Yeah. See, the whole planet under Satan ends up looking like that. After 1,000 years under Jesus, it's going to look like that. We can't even imagine what a whole planet that runs properly. It's not even in our art and our fiction. In our movies, notice that every time you have a being from outer space coming over to the earth, he's always evil. We never had a good, powerful being from outer space come over and take over the world and fix it. The messianic idea is not even... Superman came close, but besides getting a couple of buses and stopping a couple of people from robbing a bank, he never took possession of the planet. He never fulfilled his messianic role. The guy stayed in the background waiting for a bank robbery and then they would fix it. But he never established the throne. You were kind of wanting him to do that. It's like, come on, let's go. Make this guy the president of the world and let's start fixing things. But he did not. He stayed as the suffering servant. He never took dominion over the planet. That would have been a great way to end the Superman series. But no, every time we have an out of earth guy coming over, besides E.T. who left, all other invasions have always been evil, and notice that mankind had to get together to fight off the big bad aliens. It's always mankind getting together and the alien being fought off because they're evil. There is no good supernatural being coming over. And that's why the rich, powerful people of the world today, they don't have a whole lot of respect for this Messiah because I haven't seen anything tangible. I need to see it. Nothing I could invest in. Today's what counts. Tomorrow, we'll see.